Hello. I'm really glad you're here tonight. This hour is different from the rest of the day. It doesn't ask you to decide anything. It doesn't ask you to perform or explain or keep up. It simply invites you to lie still and let your thoughts move at their own pace. As the years pass, nighttime becomes a kind of companion, a place where the mind is free to wander without interruption, where memories return, not urgently but patiently, where understanding settles in quietly without needing words. Later in life, the mind doesn't race the way it once did. It reflects, it revisits, it connects dots that once seemed unrelated, and it does this most honestly when the lights are off and the world has gone silent. This space is for those thoughts, the ones that don't surface during the day, the ones that arrive only when you're alone with yourself, resting, remembering, and gently making sense of a long, lived-in life. But tonight, we're not just exploring any kind of reflection. Tonight, we're going somewhere specific. We're going into the silence, the particular silence of night, the kind that presses in gently from all sides when the television is off and the phone is face down and the house has finally stopped its daytime noise. The kind of silence that isn't empty at all, but full of everything you've ever been, full of every voice that has ever spoken your name, full of every room you've ever sat in when the world outside grew still, because that's the thing you've discovered, maybe without even naming it. Silence isn't the absence of sound. Silence is where the echoes live, the echoes of your life, the echoes of the people you've loved, the echoes of who you used to be and who you are still becoming. In the silence of the night, those echoes don't fade. They deepen. They grow clearer. They speak to you in a language that doesn't require ears to hear. So take a slow breath. Let your body soften into the bed and allow this night to meet you where you are. And now, before we begin, if this kind of honest, gentle reflection speaks to you, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. And down in the comments, tell me where you're listening from and what time it is where you are right now. There's something comforting about knowing we're all here together, scattered across time zones, but united in these later hours when the world finally grows still. So settle in, adjust your pillows, find a comfortable position, and know that for the next hour, you're not alone in whatever wisdom you're carrying, whatever understanding you've earned, whatever truths rise to the surface when the lights go out. Let's begin. The room you're lying in right now is quiet, really quiet, the kind of quiet that takes a few moments to notice properly. At first, the silence feels like simply the absence of noise. The television isn't on. No one is talking. The traffic outside has thinned to almost nothing. The hum of the day has wound itself down to a low and barely perceptible vibration somewhere far beneath awareness. But stay with the silence a little longer. Don't reach for anything. Don't turn anything on. Just let the quiet be exactly what it is. Allow it to settle around you, the way dust settles after movement stops. Allow it to find its own level, its own weight, its own particular texture in this room, on this night. Because something begins to happen when you stop resisting the silence, when you stop filling it, when you stop treating it like a problem to be solved. it starts to change. It starts to breathe. It starts to reveal itself as something far more layered than emptiness. You begin to notice the small sounds that the noise of the day was drowning out, the low, almost imperceptible breath of the house around you, the distant suggestion of wind moving against the window, your own breathing rising and falling with a rhythm your body has maintained every moment of your life without requiring your attention. The faint, steady percussion of your own heartbeat, reliable and patient, doing its work in the quiet. These sounds were always there. They didn't arrive when the silence did. They were simply buried beneath everything else, and the silence reveals them. The silence has always had this quality, this capacity to uncover what was hidden underneath the noise, what was waiting beneath the surface of the louder, more insistent world. And then something else arrives, something that makes no sound at all and yet fills the room more completely than any noise ever could. Memory surfaces, feeling rises. The particular weight of a long and fully lived life presses in gently from all sides, unhurried and undemanding, not requiring anything from you except your willingness to receive it. This is what the silence does at night. This is what it has always done every night of your life, whether you are paying attention or not. It returns you to yourself. It brings you back to the truth of who you are beneath all the roles you play and all the noise you make and all the busy, effortful business of being a person in the world. Tonight, you're paying attention. You are not always comfortable with silence. Think back. Think all the way back to the beginning of your relationship with quiet, and you'll find that it was complicated from the start. As a child, silence meant something was wrong, or it could mean that. You learned early to read the quality of silence in your house. There was the silence of a peaceful evening, the comfortable, unhurried quiet of people at rest, of a family settled in for the night, of the world outside slowing down into darkness. That silence felt like safety, like the exhale at the end of a long day, like permission to stop. But there was another kind of silence too. The silence when the adults in your life were angry with each other, but not speaking about it. The silence when something had happened that no one was explaining to you. The silence that stretched too long and felt too tight, like a rubber band pulled almost to its limit. You learned to distinguish between these silences before you had words to name the difference. You learned to read the air, to feel the temperature of quiet rooms, to know when silence was safe and when it was not. Children are extraordinarily sensitive to this. They have no other choice. When they don't have access to information, they read atmosphere instead. And you were no different. You carried a kind of inner barometer that registered the pressure of silence, that told you whether the quiet around you meant peace or meant something held painfully in reserve. But there were also nights, and these are the ones you hold gently, the ones worth returning to, when the silence was genuinely, uncomplicated good. When the house had settled into real quiet, when the people you loved were safe and at rest, when nothing was held in reserve, when the darkness outside the window was simply the natural darkness of the world doing what the world does when the sun goes down. You remember lying in your childhood bed on those particular nights, the sheets tucked around you, The familiar shadows of your bedroom making their familiar shapes on the ceiling. The small, ordinary sounds of a sleeping household moving through the walls. A parent's footsteps in the hallway. Water running somewhere. The creak of a floorboard. And then, slowly, even those sounds retreating, until everything was still. The silence on those nights felt like a gift, like something given to you specifically, like the whole world had arranged itself into quiet just for your benefit, just so you could have this one undisturbed hour of simply being yourself in the dark without needing to be anything for anyone. That child is still somewhere inside you. That capacity for stillness, for receiving the gift of quiet without immediately trying to fill it. It hasn't left you. It's been buried sometimes, under years of busyness and responsibility and the accumulated weight of everything a life requires. But it's there. The silence finds it every time. The silence has always known where that part of you is kept. You remember specific childhood silences that have never fully left you. The silence of a summer night with the window cracked just enough to let in the cool air and the smell of grass and the sound of crickets doing their patient, rhythmic work in the dark. There was something about that particular combination, the warmth of the bed, the coolness of the air, the sound that wasn't quite sound underneath the cricket song, that felt like being held by something larger than a person, like being held by the night itself. You remember the silence of Snowfall, if you grew up where it snowed. That quality of muffled, softened quiet that snow creates is unlike any other silence in nature. It's a silence with weight, a silence with texture. The world outside the window would go white and still, and the ordinary sounds that usually traveled through the air, traffic, voices, the ambient noise of human life, would be absorbed into the snow, swallowed into the white. And you would lie in your bed and feel the particular piece of a world made quiet by weather, made quiet by something no one had planned or controlled or intended. These silences shaped you. They taught you something about what peace could feel like before life got complicated enough to make peace feel like something that required effort, before you had to work for quiet instead of simply receiving it. As a teenager, your relationship with silence changed. It became charged. It became something you either chased desperately or ran from completely, depending on what mood the silence was in and what it was carrying on any given night. You remember the noise of those years. The music played too loud, because too loud meant you didn't have to hear your own thoughts, didn't have to sit with the questions that were growing in you faster than you had answers for them. Who are you? What do you want? Who do you love? What do you believe in? What does your life mean? And who are you becoming? And why does everything feel so enormous and so confusing and so full of feeling that there's no container large enough to hold it? Those questions lived in the silence, patient and relentless, waiting for the noise to stop. And sometimes you weren't ready to face them. Sometimes the questions felt too big, and the silence that held them felt dangerous. Like, if you sat in it too long, you might lose yourself in it, might fall into it, and not find your way back to the surface. So you filled the silence. You filled it with sound and motion and the constant company of other people and the thousand small urgencies of teenage life. You kept the silence at a manageable distance. You let it know it wasn't welcome until you were ready. But it was always there. It always waited. And there were nights when the noise ran out, when the music stopped and the friends went home and the house was still, and you were alone in your room with the dark and the quiet and nowhere left to hide from yourself. On those nights, the silence came in anyway. It didn't ask permission. It simply arrived and settled around you and made its presence known. And here is what you discovered on those nights, even though you wouldn't have had the language for it at the time. The silence didn't break you. It felt like it might. It felt enormous and heavy and full of things you couldn't name and couldn't resolve. But it didn't break you. It sat with you. And in the sitting, something was happening beneath the discomfort. Something quiet and necessary and real. Your interior life was being constructed in those silences. The person you would eventually become was being built, not in the bright and social hours of the day, but here, in the dark, in the honest and undefended hours of late night, when your defenses had worn through and you were just yourself without the performance. Tender, confused, alive to everything. You were learning what mattered to you, what hurt you in ways that meant something, what filled you and what emptied you. You were learning the difference between the feelings that were real and the feelings that were borrowed from other people's expectations. You were cataloging yourself, and the silence was the only place quiet enough to hear the catalog being read. You didn't know it then. You were too busy surviving the intensity of those years. But looking back from here, from the other side of everything that followed, you can see what those silent teenage nights were doing for you. They were making you specific, making you real, making you someone with an interior, someone with depth, someone who knew what they felt even when they couldn't yet express it. The silence was your first true school. You left home, and the silence has changed again. You moved into spaces that belonged to no one's history but your own. First apartments, first bedrooms that weren't your childhood bedroom, first cities where no one knew your name at the start, and the silence of a new place felt unfamiliar and slightly disorienting. The silence of a new place has its own texture, its own vocabulary. Your first apartment made sounds you didn't recognize yet. Pipes in the walls, footsteps on the ceiling, the particular way sound traveled through those specific walls, arriving muffled or too sharp, depending on the hour and the thickness of the building's old bones. You lay awake in those early weeks, learning the language of your new silence, training yourself to feel at home in it, telling yourself it was yours even before it felt that way. There is a kind of courage in this that you didn't know to name at the time. The courage of claiming a silence as your own before you've earned the familiarity to do so, of lying in the dark of an unfamiliar room and deciding, by force of intention if necessary, that this quiet is yours now, that you belong here, that the darkness in this particular space is not a threat, but a beginning. You were good at this kind of courage, even when you didn't feel courageous, even when the new silence felt isolating and the city outside felt indifferent and the whole enterprise of building a life from scratch felt overwhelming in ways you couldn't fully admit. You showed up anyway. You lay in the silence of your new space and you kept going. The silence in those early adult years held both kinds of nights. There were nights when the quiet felt like freedom, when you closed the door on the world and felt the silence settle around you and thought, this is mine, this space, this life, this silence, these choices, or no one else's rules, no one else's timeline, no one watching, no one expecting, just you and the quiet and the open, unwritten future. Those nights were gifts. They had the same quality as the best childhood silences. Permission. The permission to be exactly who you were, in exactly the space you'd chosen, on exactly your own terms. But other nights, the silence was very loud, in the way that loneliness is loud. You know this. Loneliness doesn't make noise, and yet it occupies silence completely. It fills the empty space of a room the way water fills a container. It presses against the walls. It makes itself known in the quality of the quiet more than in any sound. You pulled the blankets up on those nights, and you lay in the silence of your own space with the loneliness for company, and you had to decide what to do with it. Whether to fight it or sit with it. Whether to reach for the phone or stay still with the quiet. Whether to treat the silence as an enemy to be defeated or a companion to be understood. In those years, you began learning the most important lesson the silence would ever teach you. The difference between loneliness and solitude. Loneliness is silence that wounds. Solitude is silence you've made a kind of peace with. And the distance between those two things is not measured in circumstances, but in relationship. In how willing you are to be present with the quiet instead of escaping it. You were learning, imperfectly and slowly, to choose presence. Someone came into your life and the silence transformed again, the way it always does when a real presence enters it. There is a particular silence that exists between two people who have just found each other. Not the absence of things to say, but the opposite. A silence so saturated with feeling that words seem inadequate, too blunt, too small. You sat across from this person in the early days, and the silence between you was alive with something you didn't yet have a name for. It hummed. It carried a current. It said more than conversation could manage. You remember that silence, the way it felt like standing at the edge of something enormous and realizing the enormousness was good, was wanted, that the feeling wasn't fear, but its close relative, the feeling of something mattering so completely that your body registered it before your mind caught up. Then came the first silence of truly sleeping beside someone. 2 heartbeats, 2 breathing rhythms, the soft and human sounds of another person navigating the night beside yours. But underneath all of it, a new quality of quiet that you'd never encountered before. A silence with company in it. A darkness that wasn't empty. You lay beside this person and the night felt different in its whole character. Not just different, but revealed somehow. As if you'd been living with a limited version of what nighttime could be, and this was the fuller version. The one that had always been available, but required another person's presence to unlock. Their warmth changed the temperature of the space. Their breathing gave the silence a rhythm it hadn't had before. Their presence changed the quality of the dark in ways you couldn't explain and didn't need to. You simply felt it, felt the difference between being alone in the silence and being accompanied by it. There was vulnerability in this that you hadn't anticipated. Because in the silence beside someone else, especially in the beginning, all the careful presentations of yourself fall away. At 2 a.m, lying beside someone in the dark, you are simply a person, breathing, needing rest, needing warmth, needing to be trusted in your most unguarded state by someone who chose to be there beside you. The silence asked you to trust that, to let it be witnessed, to let someone else be present for the honest, unperformed version of you that only the nighttime silence gets to see. And you did. Imperfectly, nervously, but genuinely. You let the silence hold both of you. You let the night know you both at once. You are here now, in this moment, in this particular silence. The night has settled completely around you. The world outside has grown as still as it gets, and the echoes that live in silence are beginning to rise, one by one, patient as they have always been patient, returning to you the way light returns in the morning, not rushing, not demanding, simply arriving because it is their nature to arrive. You have lived inside many silences. You have been changed by the quiet of every room you've ever rested in, every night you've ever lain awake, every dark hour that asked you to be honest with yourself, and you were honest. Each of those silences is here with you now, layered into this one, present in the specific quality of the quiet that surrounds you. The child who heard the house settle and felt safe is here. The teenager who lay in the dark with questions larger than answers is here. The young adult who claimed an unfamiliar silence as their own is here. The person who discovered what shared silence felt like is here. All of these versions of you, all of these silences, all of these echoes, they're in this room, in this dark, in this particular unrepeatable stillness of this one night. You have lived inside silence all your life. You have been shaped by it, held by it, taught by it, and sometimes frightened by it. You have run from it and returned to it and gradually learned to welcome it the way you welcome an old friend whose honesty you've come to trust. And the night isn't done with you yet. There is more to hold, more to remember, more echoes still to surface from the deep and patient quiet of a life long and fully lived. Rest in this silence for now. Breathe in it. Let it be exactly what it is. Not empty, never empty, but filled from edge to edge with everything that has made you who you are. The second half of the night is waiting, and the silence has more to say. The silence is still here. It never left. It was simply waiting, the way silence always waits, without impatience, without demand, without any need for you to hurry toward it or explain your delay. You took the time you needed. You moved through the years at the pace life required, and the silence was here the whole time, present in every room you passed through, present in every night that found you wherever you were, present in this very moment as your body rests and your breath moves slowly and the dark holds everything at once. You were not the same person in every silence. That is the thing worth understanding now, in this particular hour, in this particular stillness. The silence was constant. You were not. You moved through it, changed and changing, different in every decade. different in every season of the life you were building without always knowing you were building it. The silence received every version of you without preference. It did not love you more when you were whole and love you less when you were broken. It simply held you every time, without condition. And now here you are, the person all those silences made, the person who carries every quiet night inside them, like a series of rooms inside a house that has no end. Each room a different era, each room a different understanding, each room lit by a different quality of dark. Take a breath now, a slow one. Let it fill you completely, and then let it go completely. Feel the weight of the bed beneath you. Feel the stillness of the air around you. Notice that you are here, that you are breathing, that the night is neither threatening nor urgent, that it is simply the night doing what nights have always done since before you were born and will continue doing long after you are gone. You are inside something ancient and continuous, and the silence that holds you has held everything that has ever existed in the dark. There came a time in your life when silence arrived wearing a face you hadn't expected, the face of loss. You know the silence that follows a death. If you have lived long enough, and you have, you know it with a particular and irreplaceable intimacy. It is unlike any other silence you have ever sat inside. It has a different gravity, a different quality of light, or rather, of the absence of light. When someone you loved died, the silence that followed was not peaceful. It was not the good silence of a summer night or the clean silence of snowfall. It was a silence that felt wrong in the way that the absence of sound in a place where sound should be feels wrong. You came home after the phone call or after the hospital or after the funeral and the house was quiet, they're saying. In a way, it had never been quiet before. Not the quiet of rest, but the quiet of removal. Something had been subtracted from the world, and the world had not yet figured out how to fill the space. The air itself felt different. The rooms felt different. Even the particular light of that day, or the particular dark of that night, felt different. Thin, altered, like a photograph of a place, rather than the place itself. You move through that silence, not knowing what to do with your hands, not knowing where to put yourself. The ordinary objects of your life sat exactly where you had left them, and they were exactly as you remembered them, and they were somehow completely wrong. Wrong in the way that a coat left hanging on a hook after its owner has died is wrong. Present, unchanged, belonging to a world that no longer fully exists. You lay down in that silence eventually. You had to. The body insists on rest, even when the mind and heart have no use for it. You lay in the dark, and the silence was enormous, and it pressed against every surface of you, and you led it. Because there was nothing else to do. Because grief, real grief, does not negotiate with silence. It moves into it. It takes up residence. It makes the silence its home for however long it needs, and something happened in that silence. Something that took time to recognize. Something that didn't announce itself with any clarity, but arrived gradually, the way dawn arrives, without a single moment you can point to and say, there. That is the moment the dark became light. The silence began to carry them, the people you had lost, not in a way that was frightening or strange, or beyond the reach of reason, in a way that was simply true. In the silence, their voices returned, not literally, not in any way that would require explanation or defense, but in the way that everything deeply known returns in quiet, in the way that the people who shaped you are present in the shape you now carry in the world. You heard your mother in the silence, her particular way of saying your name, the specific rhythm of her sentences when she was telling you something she thought was important, the sound of her moving through a house at night, the footsteps you learned before you had words for anything, the footsteps you would know in any darkness. You heard your father in the silence, whatever was particular to him, the sound of his laughter, if his laughter was a sound you loved, the quiet of his presence, if he was a quiet man, the specific weight of his attention when he was paying it fully, without distraction, to you. You heard the friends who left too early, the voices of people whose absence rearranged the world's architecture. You heard them in the silence, not as ghosts, but as echoes, as the honest, permanent residue that people leave in the lives of the ones who loved them. The silence was holding them for you. It had been holding them the whole time, waiting until you were still enough to receive them. The silences of middle life are different from any that came before. They have more layers, more history, more of the accumulated weight of all the silences that preceded them folded into their texture. By the middle of your life, you had stopped being surprised by quiet. You had learned the hard way and the soft way and every way in between what silence was capable of. You had sat with it in joy and sat with it in grief. You had shared it with people you loved and endured it alone when alone was all there was. You had run from it and returned to it and gradually arrived at a relationship with it that was neither simple nor resolved, but was, at least, honest. In middle life, the nights began to feel different. Not worse, not better. Different in the way that everything feels different once you understand it cannot last. Once the permanence you thought was permanent reveals itself as temporary. Once you've attended enough funerals and watched enough people age and felt your own body begin its own quiet negotiation with time, you lay in the silence of middle life, and you began to think about the future in a way you hadn't thought about it before. Not the future as possibility, the way you thought about it in youth, but the future as finitude, as the narrowing of the space remaining, as the thing that is approaching whether or not you look at it. This wasn't depression. It wasn't despair. It was something more honest than either of those things. It was simply the arrival of clarity, the moment when the silence stopped cooperating with the comfortable illusions and started telling the truth instead. You lay there in the dark and you thought, this is not forever. None of this is forever. The people I love are not forever. The house I sleep in is not forever. The body I inhabit is not forever. The specific, irreplaceable texture of my own awareness, the way I experience light and sound and memory and feeling, this is not forever either. And the silence held that truth without flinching, without softening it, without offering you a way around it. But here is what the silence also held, in the same breath, in the same darkness, without contradiction. It held the weight of everything you had been given, everything you had experienced, every morning you had woken to, and every night you had survived, and every person who had looked at you with love, and every moment of beauty you had encountered and been changed by without even knowing the changing was happening. The silence held the truth of ending, and the silence held the truth of fullness. And it did not ask you to choose between them or resolve them or find a way to make them comfortable together. It simply held them both. This is what the silence of middle life teaches, if you are willing to sit in it long enough. That loss and gratitude are not opposites. That finitude and meaning are not opposites. That knowing something will end does not diminish its reality while it is here. That lying in the dark with the truth of your mortality is not a defeat, but a kind of homecoming, a returning to something honest after years of comfortable distance. You lay in that silence, and you were afraid sometimes. This is worth acknowledging. The fear was real, and it deserved its space, and you gave it space. You let it sit with you in the dark, and you didn't pretend it wasn't there. The courage of middle life is not the absence of fear. It is the willingness to remain in the silence with the fear and not let the fear decide what you do with the rest of your time. There are silences that belong specifically to parenthood, and you carry them differently than any others. If you raise children, you know the silence of watching them sleep, the particular quality of standing in a doorway at night, looking at a child who doesn't know you're there, and feeling the weight of how much they matter. Not in an abstract way, in the most concrete possible way, in the way that makes your chest tight and your throat close and your hands want to do something, anything, even though there is nothing to do. There is nothing to do except stand in the silence and witness this small person breathing in the dark and feel the full, staggering reality of loving something this completely. You stood in those doorways more times than you can count. Some nights because you were checking that they were safe. Some nights because you simply needed to see them. Some nights because the world felt too large and too uncertain, and you needed to remind yourself that this, at least, was real. This breathing child in this dark room, in this quiet house, this was real. The silence of those rooms was a different silence than any you had known before. It held a different quality of attention, a different quality of presence, because you were not in it for yourself. You were in it for them. The silence asked you to set yourself aside completely and simply be present to another person's peace, to stand guard over it, to be the one who remained awake so they could remain asleep. There is a profound love in this that doesn't have a commonly used name. The love of watching over someone else's rest, of holding the silence so someone more vulnerable can inhabit it safely, of being the wall between a sleeping child and whatever the world might bring. You were that wall. You stood in those doorways, and you were the silence's guardian and theirs. And then they grew. They grew the way all children grow, faster than feels possible, faster than the heart is prepared for. The rooms that once held small sleeping bodies became rooms that held teenagers who stayed up later than you did, whose music bled under the door, whose silences were no longer the uncomplicated silences of early childhood, but the loaded, private silences of people becoming themselves. You learn to respect those silences. learned that the closed door and the quiet on the other side of it was not rejection, but the necessary withdrawal of a self-information. You had done the same in your own teenage bedroom, in your own charged and complicated silences. You knew what was happening on the other side of that door. You knew it was essential, and so you let the silence be theirs. You held your own, and then they left. This is the silence that no one warns you about with sufficient thoroughness. The silence of the house after the children leave it. Not the silence of rest, not the silence of peace, but the silence of an absence, so specific you can locate it in individual rooms. The bedroom that used to hold someone and now holds only their former presence. The kitchen that used to produce noise at unpredictable hours and is now quiet at exactly the times it used to be loud. You moved through that silence, learning it the way you learned the silence of your first apartment decades before, slowly, with effort, telling yourself it was yours now, this new quiet, even before it felt that way. Training yourself to receive it as gift rather than deprivation. And gradually, it became something else. It became a space in which you could hear yourself again, in which the questions you'd been carrying beneath the noise of active parenthood could finally surface and find air. Who are you now? It asked, when you are not primarily defined by the daily work of caring for someone smaller. What do you want when what you want is no longer second to what they need? What does the silence hold for you, specifically you, in this particular chapter that belongs to no one else? These were not easy questions, but they were honest ones. And the silence, as it always has, held them for you without judgment, waited patiently for whatever answers you were able to find. You have come a long way to arrive at the silence you are lying inside right now. Think of all the rooms, all the beds, all the dark ceilings you have stared at over the course of everything you have been and done and survived. Think of all the times you lay in the quiet and thought you could not get through what was coming, and then you got through it. Think of all the times the silence felt like too much to bear, and then you bore it. Think of all the times the night felt endless and morning felt impossible, and the only thing you could do was lie still in the dark and wait. You waited. Every time you waited, and the morning always came. This is not a small thing. This is not a minor detail in the story of who you are. This patience, this capacity to remain inside difficult silence without being destroyed by it, this is one of the most important things you have ever done. You did it alone in apartments when you were young and lonely. You did it in hospital rooms when your body was failing you. You did it in the dark months after losses that rearranged the world. You did it in the complicated silences of relationships that were ending or beginning or transforming into something neither person had anticipated. You did it all of those times. You are doing it right now. There is a particular quality to the silence of later life that is different from all the silences that came before it. It has depth, not the depth of darkness or despair, but the depth of something that has been broken in enough places and mended in enough ways to have a richness that simpler things don't possess. The depth of a voice that has spoken many true things, the depth of a face that has held many expressions, the depth of a silence that has waited through many long nights and knows from long experience that it can wait through this one too. You carry your history in you differently now than you did in earlier years. When you were young, the past was something you were leaving behind, something you were running from or escaping or trying to put sufficient distance between yourself and it. The future was the direction everything moved toward, and the past was just the territory you'd already crossed. But at some point, without a clear announcement, the relationship reversed. The past became the territory you returned to. The memories became not obstacles to the future, but companions in the present. The voices of the people you'd loved and lost became less painful in their absence and more present in their echo. The silence of the night became not a void you were crossing toward tomorrow, but a space you could inhabit fully, right now, surrounded by everything you had accumulated in a life long and honestly lived. This is one of the gifts that silence offers in later life that it couldn't offer earlier. Earlier, silence asked you to become. Now it invites you simply to be, to rest in the accumulated weight of who you already are, to let the echoes of your own life be enough, to stop moving toward the next thing long enough to fully inhabit this one. You are enough in this silence, exactly as you are, right now, not the version of you that still has things to accomplish or prove or correct, not the version that is measured against what you might have been, or should have been, or almost were. Just this version, the one lying here in the dark, breathing slowly, listening to the silence speak in the language of your own lived life. The echoes are everywhere tonight. In the quiet of this room, they rise and settle and rise again, patient and unhurried, not demanding your attention, but receiving it when you offer it. You hear the echo of a kitchen table where someone you loved sat across from you in the morning light, the specific silence of that ordinary moment, coffee cooling, the day not yet started, the world outside not yet intruded. That silence lives here with you now. You didn't know then that it was precious. You were just sitting at a kitchen table in the morning, but the silence held it carefully and returns it to you tonight, complete and detailed and more beautiful than you knew to be grateful for at the time. You hear the echo of a car ride taken in comfortable quiet, long distances sometimes, or short ones. The silence between two people who know each other well enough not to fill every moment with words. The particular ease of that, the safety of it, the way being known by someone translates into being able to be quiet with them without the quiet meaning anything troubling. You carry that ease with you. It lives in your body the way all the best things live in the body, not as thought, but as knowing, as something you don't need to reconstruct because it never left. You hear the echo of a laugh, yours or someone else's, the kind of laugh that comes without warning and takes the whole room with it, the kind that leaves you breathless and wipes your eyes and returns you to the present moment completely. All pretense dissolved, all distance collapsed, just the pure involuntary response of being genuinely, unexpectedly delighted. That laugh lives in the silence. Its echo reaches you here even now, and something in your chest warms at the sound of it. You hear the echo of rain against a window in a room where you felt safe. The rhythm of water on glass, the grey light of a rainy afternoon or a rainy night, and you inside it, warm and contained, having nowhere to go and no reason to go there. The silence underneath the rain, the way rain creates its own kind of silence, by covering the other sounds, by giving the world a new texture. You knew that silence intimately in some chapter of your life. It is here tonight, soft and grey, and deeply familiar. You hear the echo of a hand held, the specific warmth of someone else's hand in yours. Not the dramatic hand-holding of crises, though that too, but the ordinary hand-holding of two people walking somewhere, of two people sitting beside each other, of two people navigating the small passage from here to there and choosing to navigate it in contact. That warmth lives in the palm of your hand right now, if you stay still enough to feel it. The body remembers being held. The body carries the memory of contact long after the contact ends. These echoes are not losses. Not tonight. Tonight, they are gifts. Tonight, the silence offers them to you, not as reminders of what you no longer have, but as evidence of what you were given. Evidence of what was real. Evidence that your life contained these things, that these moments existed, that you were there for them, present and alive and receiving them, even when you didn't fully know you were. The endless echoes of a life that has held so much. The night is moving toward its deepest hour now, the hour when even the echoes grow quieter, when the memories settle like sediment in still water, and the silence becomes something closer to pure rest than to reflection. You can feel the shift, the mind beginning to soften its grip, the thoughts losing their sharp edges, the memories that were vivid and present beginning to blur gently at their boundaries, the way everything blurs gently at the boundaries in the last hour before sleep. This is not loss. This is arrival. This is the silence completing its work for tonight and inviting you to lay down the weight of remembering for a few hours, to let the echoes rest, to trust that they'll be here when you return to them. They always are. They are not going anywhere. You have carried much tonight. You have moved through the rooms of your life with willingness and honesty. You have allowed the silence to show you what it wanted to show you. You have sat with the tender memories and the difficult ones and the complicated ones that are both at once. You have been present to your own history in a way that requires a particular kind of courage that you have quietly possessed all along. Now it is time to put the weight down for a while. Not permanently. You'll pick it back up in the morning or whenever the day requires it. The weight of a full life doesn't disappear. It simply waits beside the bed while you rest. It will be there when you need it. The memories will be there. The echoes will be there. The accumulated understanding of everything you've lived through will be there, patient and unchanged, exactly where you left it. But right now, for this hour, you don't have to carry any of it. You can let your mind go soft at the edges. You can let the silence stop speaking and start simply being. You can let the night be what it is in its deepest form. Not a space for memory or reflection or careful, honest reckoning, but a space for rest. For the deep, wordless, uncomplicated rest of a body that has worked hard and a mind that has thought honestly, and a heart that has loved with everything it had. You deserve this rest, not as a reward, not as something earned through sufficient effort or sufficient reflection, simply as what you need, simply as what the night is for. Your body knows this. Feel how it settles. Feel the way your muscles are releasing, one by one, the small tensions they've been holding without your awareness all day, your shoulders, your jaw, your hands, the places where you hold things without meaning to. Let them go now. Let the bed take the weight. Let the dark take the weight. Let the silence hold all of it while you float free of it for a few hours. Your breath is slower now. You can feel it. Each exhale carrying something with it. Something you no longer need to hold. The thoughts that were moving have begun to still. The echoes that were rising have begun to settle. The whole interior world that was so active an hour ago is growing quiet in the best possible way. The way it grows quiet when it has had enough and is ready to rest. This is the silence at its most generous, not the silence that asks things of you, not the silence that surfaces memories or surfaces questions or requires honesty or courage or any particular kind of strength. This is the silence that simply receives you, that asks for nothing except your presence, that holds you exactly as you are, tired and full and complete in ways you may not be able to articulate, but can feel in the deepest part of yourself. You have been here before, this threshold, this place where waking ends and something else begins. You have crossed it thousands of times. Your body knows the way. Your mind, even now, is finding its own path toward it, not requiring your guidance, not requiring your effort, just your willingness to stop resisting, just your permission to let go. Let go. The silent night is with you. The endless echoes are settling into something deeper than memory now, something more like the bones of who you are, something permanent and structural and unhurried, something that was there before tonight and will be there tomorrow. You don't have to hold them consciously. They are held in you whether you are awake or sleeping, whether you are remembering or resting, whether you are here in this room or moving through the world that will meet you again in the morning. You are the sum of every silence you've ever inhabited, every quiet night, every honest dark hour, every moment of stillness in which you have returned to yourself and found something worth keeping. All of that is you now. All of that travels with you. All of that rests when you rest. The night is deep and still and full of everything you have ever been, and it is asking nothing of you now except that you let yourself sleep. So let yourself sleep. The fires die down, the stories settle, and the world grows still. Let your thoughts drift away like embers on the wind. Good night. You've journeyed far through time tonight. Now it's time to journey into dreams. Close your eyes, breathe, and let sleep find you.